Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. As always, a reminder that this podcast does not constitute real estate advice, legal advice, broker advice, or advice of any other nature. This is an informative podcast. And if you need advice, please reach out to the correct professional who can help you. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Launch Grow Harvest Podcast, Business Growth Coaching with Connie Boona and Roland Kim.
Hey everybody, Connie Boona here.
And Roland Kim.
This is the Launch Grow Harvest Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're excited to have you here today.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about AI and kind of how are we starting to use it? Where are we seeing it positively impact ourselves and our business and potentially also some concerns? I find it very interesting. I'm always a late adopter on artificial intelligence and technology. And I started dabbling with it here in late 2023 and early 24. And I certainly see some applications that were positively using it, that it's effective. And it's also got some very alarming, challenges as well, because I think in speeding up, you also have a lot more momentum that the crashes, so to speak, are a lot bigger when things aren't right. Partner, what are you using AI for so far?
Yeah, really minimal, very, very minimal adoption on my part at this stage. I consider myself to be a late adopter of technology. So my interactions so far have been really just to explore, writing out like copy and stuff like that. I know that with my band Queer as Funk, awesome band. We actually we were able to, the band was like super keen on giving it a try, so we were able to, plug in some inputs and produce a whole bunch of marketing materials for the launch of our show this past summer. I can't remember the technical term because I don't work in marketing media, but the folks that took care of that, previously you would hire a person to write all of that content, and or earlier stages of our band, like somebody personally is like drafting it out painstakingly. And in this scenario, it was like, drop a couple of things into ChatGPT and like, boom, like there's a bunch of media releases for the band's show with like decent content. And so, one of the things, partner, that you brought up, or like what are the risks, right? Is I think the risk there is around being an editor and ensuring the accuracy of the content that's being generated through the AI. The other thing that we've been utilizing it for is, producing some content that, again, we previously may have hired out to marketing companies. Things like, for example, building out some social media templates around, various neighborhoods in the areas that we are predominantly marketing and selling in, and building out some good quality content there. I often got the tap in our team as somebody that, like, for me, words come fluidly. You might notice that if you're listening to my podcast and you hear my voice all the time. Shut up, Connie. But I think it's kind of cool. What are you seeing, partner? Where are you using it?
So I've started fleshing out ideas that I already feel I think I have enough content. I might throw the context into it and then see, there's a few other points that AI came up with that are connected and are relevant, and I previously didn't connect it. So I can buffer and solidify and strengthen my conversation. For example, right now I'm kind of halfway through writing a book, 99 plus lead engines, and I'm throwing in, an engine of how you can grow your business. One example, I feel I already have it flushed out and have kind of a game plan behind it, and I put it into the system, and it brings up a few more points. It also also obviously brings up a lot of generic stuff that, one, I might not agree with, or two, that I've already covered. But it can bring in more information that you're like, oh, that was great to know, and mix it together. It's a better soup at the end. Same as in we've started putting in strata documents into the system, and it can summarize all the expenses that are coming up. You could ask it to identify all the special assessments that have been spoken about and the upcoming costs that are expected in the next, let's say, 5 years. And so to that point, it makes a really quick gather of information and collects, content. And as quickly as that is cool to watch, it's very alarming, especially as a brokerage owner where, our natural experience from the last 15 years of doing thousands of sales is we can look at a number, we can look at it, it's mentioning parking membrane repairs and it says 47,000. You and I can look at that and instantly know that's either a patch or it's just a partial item and dig deeper. My concern for people who are using AI almost to answer questions outside of their skill set is that they have no context to see that information is missing. And so same as if someone wanted to write a book and just threw in questions or comments on what they want to expand on, but they have no reference to it, who's to say that they will look at it and say, oh, this makes sense or it doesn't make sense? It's more how much incomplete information is being repackaged and pushed forward. That is pretty alarming for me.
I feel like that is such an important consideration and point. And I do fear for the plagiarism side of the obvious facts of using that kind of tool. And for the liability side, you drew attention to, just for clarity, we certainly are not using this as a tool to read strata documents. We've used it simply to just analyze what it pushes out as results for documents which we've already evaluated and analyzed ourselves. The thing that scares me when I think about it broadly is that people will not have the ability to be able to challenge the legitimacy of what has been produced. And so, for example, you drew a very, very fine point around the parking membrane, and having the experience to know that $46,000 for a membrane is clearly a patch. That a membrane is hundreds of thousands of dollars for most buildings. When I know that companies, we've already been approached at a brokerage level by other companies that are trying to monetize apps that will simply just be using these systems in the background and then packaging them up in a nice way for you. And my concern always is around the integrity of the service that you are providing to your client. When you are in our role, certainly as real estate agents, and our clients are expecting us to assist them in the review, approval, and digestion of documents, there is an onus of responsibility that we are reading them and understanding them and then providing some feedback, context. And so while I love the tools that assist us with aggregation, there are tools currently that we use that help us aggregate the minutes so that we can see every time that there's been a mention of a depreciation report, every time there's been a mention of a strata fee increase or a leak or whatever. But to remove entirely the role of the professional to actually go deep into the literal content, for me, feels like a really thin line on a pretty significant breach of your responsibility.
Definitely. I mean, you have a fiduciary role if we're talking about being a realtor, where you're well a half dozen years into your profession, and then you start realizing how little you know and how much more you you need to learn and the exposure you have. And I think AI, through the collection of information, it's almost like putting someone into an airplane without them actually having known how to land it or take off. So you feel pretty confident in flight. But then when things get bumpy and you got to, do the critical steps, you're like, oh my gosh, this is, I wasn't trained for this.
Yes.
And so it will be an interesting thing in our lifetime to see here how that part of it is protected, because everything is fine until there's a problem. And so, that more so than me as a managing broker, that a lot of people perhaps might think that their way of operating is good because they haven't gotten in trouble for it. But just because you haven't gotten in trouble for it doesn't mean it's good. It just hasn't been under the microscope. And so, it's like how many missteps and not best practices are being pushed forward in this new world.
I mean, I think the other thing we're hearing about AI is like the erosion of jobs, of hiring real people. I know that for myself, like, call me old school. I hate going to a store and going to an auto teller. Okay. Yeah. I don't like it and I will never choose it. I always go, even if I have to wait longer in line, to the human. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason is because I feel it's important that person has a job.
Yes.
And the other thing about it is I don't like the anonymity of an experience where I've walked through a store and I literally don't interact with anybody and I'm walking out like that. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. Again, that might be just a personality difference. But I think that there is, there's been lots of conversation about AI taking over jobs. I'd love to hear your perspective on that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening. And it's interesting that I would say a lot of the people who are being affected by those jobs going away in the future are perhaps naively seeing it as a positive. Like a lot of people I know who love technology, I would say, unless you're leveling up your skill set in order to get a higher skill role, you're starting to create your own competition. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely alarmed about a lot of people who haven't upgraded their skill sets in accordance with how technology has, so to speak, taken part of their job away, and how they're going to migrate through that. What's also interesting is kind of how the subtleties, how the worst parts of the human nature are now starting to be tested by AI. And what I mean by that is those self-checkouts. I watched a documentary and it's been, like a lot of those systems can observe when people are stealing. They might not be interjecting yet, but the rate of theft has increased so dramatically. And it's increased by a lot of people that previously wouldn't steal, right? Like people wouldn't go and steal from someone else's car, but they're like somehow justified to them that, this avocado is too expensive. I still want it. So I'm going to scan it as an apple. And so, they're not thieves in their brain, but they have stolen. And what's interesting is what's it look like after, years of using automation where you can justify your choice of bad practice because you're not dealing with another human, and so yes. I think that's going to have impacts on how we deal with each other in relationships. It is also curious that the cost of theft is so much smaller than the cost of humans, and we're going down that path in many ways. Most people like celebrating. Where if I could turn off those self-check systems, I would turn those off and bring back the human. It is interesting.
I mean, Loblaws needs to make those profits, man. You got to make them off your back.
It is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, it would be amazing to see this as, sort of the way that we that I'm certainly trying to look at it, which is like, how can I have this assist me and amplify the human to human experience? How do we use this technology for a better outcome for our clients, for a better outcome for our communities, for a better outcome for our customers? I'm quite optimistic on that front, certainly, but I do think like with all evolving technologies, we do need some some sort of guardrails, let's say, around how it is utilized. And, one of the things I was thinking about in the context of all of these platforms available is like, how are like kids growing up right now? Like I can remember struggling to write a paper and like writing out my thoughts and writing it out again and going to the library. Remember the library? And you'd go to a book and you'd look up a thing and then you'd source that thing.
Yeah.
And like, where are we? I'm so far removed. My kids are still too young to be in that range. But like, I don't know where we are right now in the context of people having independent thought. But I think that there needs to be some sort of like just a little bit of a rein in around the expansion of sort of mind thought as opposed to independent thought, and mind thought from the perspective of like mind from the collective database that is the interwebs.
I hear you. I remember and same thing. I'm not sure how the studies are dealing with, citing where the source of information came from. But I vividly remember hating filling out those, the biography of where you got your information from and linking it. Bibliography, yeah. It is interesting, though. I think that is going to self-regulate itself in the future, because right now I'd say we're coming through maybe a decade of where a lot of people were not interested in seeing the proof in the pudding, so to speak. And I know you and I have spoken about this several times, where we feel like we've been in the last decade surrounded by a lot of people who've gotten visibility and noise in the marketplace, promoting and purporting to be successful and having previously had huge success, and it seems like the market has not looked deep enough into their history to prove that this person is actually speaking from experience and previous success. And it seems to be that there's been so many false prophets pushing a narrative or a marketing plan or a consulting thing. So I feel like we're probably in the future going to start swinging in a way where in the opposite direction, where people will want to see, where's the proof in the pudding? Where's the source? And where is the clarity before I, take in the information? And so we just in the early stages of information is awash, and we'll get clarity.
Look forward to it. That's a very positive way to close the conversation. Friends, if you have anything that you would be interested in hearing about or talking more about, you can reach us, Connie Buna and Roland Kim. You can find us at Keller Williams Realty Van Central in Vancouver, British Columbia, or of course on the internet at kimbuna.com, KYMBUNA.com. And we're always open to hearing your feedback about what you'd like to hear on this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.